One aspect of life that has been a fairly consistent since the Second World War is that if anybody does anything, it has to be compared to whether the Nazis did it. And if the Nazis did it, then it's probably a bad thing. You'd be hard pushed to go through any kind of long political discussion with anybody without somebody bringing up the Nazis at some point and maybe suggesting your point of view is a bit like the Nazis, or maybe you suggesting that their point of view is a bit like the Nazis. And of course there's lots and lots of people keeping an eye out for the next Hitler, you know. Everybody who speaks anything in public, they have to be fully analysed to make sure they're not Hitler in disguise. But what I always find amusing in this particular regard is that one of the most common traits of Nazis was their obsession with health. And yet whenever we have government intervention in the health of the population, for some reason nobody ever makes comparisons to the Nazis. Maybe this is just another version of the example of, well, at least they had nice roads. At least their roads were of high quality and regularly maintained. Somebody could say, well, at least they had good health of the nation. But then people don't want to say that because you're not allowed to say anything positive about the Nazis. Maybe wanting good roads to drive on is a bit Naziistic. Who knows? But of course the reason the Nazis had good roads is because they were just one big military war machine. And if there's one thing a military war machine needs, it's lots of roads everywhere to quickly deploy its troops. And of course, another part of a good war machine is you've got to have lots of healthy people. You're not a very good war machine if you've got a load of lard buckets slowly marching across the country, having to have breaks every 3 minutes because they're absolutely knackered. But what I do see a lot of in modern society is that governments are getting more and more obsessed with the health of the nation. And I'm hoping this isn't because of a war effort that they're not telling us about, but from what I can gather, it is just generally from a position of morality. However, even if it's just from a position of morality, I'd be quite interested in seeing at least one person come up, stand up and say, wait a minute, isn't this a bit Naziistic? Why is it in the government's purview to say exactly how healthy an individual should be? I mean, we all know about the excuses governments make to raise taxes, and so we get taxes on tobacco for our health, and we get taxes on alcohol for our health, and we get taxes on sugar for our health. But is the health aspect just bollocks, and it's just a means to raise taxes without people getting angry by claiming it's for our health? I mean, that's probably what it is. But if it's not, if it is actually government being concerned with our health, isn't that a bit Naziistic? A bit veering into the old eugenics, in that all human beings have to adhere to a very specific and narrow margin of health. If you are too unhealthy in some specific degree, then you are not an equally valid member of society. If you are not choosing the precisely right things to imbibe, be it food or intoxicants, then you are not essentially an equal member of society, but somebody who's chosen to be disparaged by the state. You are there for no other reason but to be made an example of, demonised for your ill health, demonised for your unhealthy ways. Well, I don't know about you, and I don't know about anybody else on the planet, but I know about me. From my point of view, I think that the growing obsession that the state has with trying to impose a certain level of healthiness upon its population is Naziistic. It's treading a path of control that shouldn't be there. Now, I'm all for guidance and information and all that kind of thing. I think if people know what they're getting into before they get into it, that is better than telling them that they're not allowed to get into it, because it denies the concept of moderation and the time-honoured phrase of everything in moderation. Now, I'm aware that things like epidemics do exist. There might be that in society there's too many people getting too fat. In a society there might be too many people chain smoking too many cigarettes. In a society there might be too many people getting outrageously drunk and being permanently addicted to alcohol. Things like these can be described as societal issues that perhaps a government should get involved in. But when they do get involved, why do they have to get involved in such a Naziistic way? Surely there must be some alternative to simply banning or heavily taxing everybody on that one specific thing that that particular politician believes is to blame. And it's without doubt that the health service does cost a lot of money, and it wouldn't cost quite so much of a lot of money if not quite so many people were unhealthy, especially in areas where I suppose technically they don't need to be. But at some point you've got to realise that you've got to just let people live their lives. You've got to allow the people a certain amount of choice to live their life how they want to make it, making mistakes or not making mistakes. If this is even assuming that drinking a can of Coca-Cola is a mistake. I mean, before long you're going to get so philosophical in this whole concept of what is a mistake that you'll start thinking that being born is a mistake. Nobody wants to be unwell and nobody wants to die. But at some point in everybody's lives those two things are going to happen. The latter only once, the former quite regularly probably. But people have got to try and enjoy their life while they're having it. There's little point getting to 100 years old without ever being ill and never dying if you haven't had any particular enjoyment in life. If you've just spent your whole life looking at other people and saying, well, I'm glad I'm not them, while you munch on your lettuce leaf and drink a glass of water. And it's like whenever somebody tries to make this kind of point or this kind of argument or this kind of angle as to why this obsession with health is a bit Naziistic, people will present you with extremes. And they'll say, look at this person, look how extremely unhealthy they are. Or look at this person with this horrific disease, if only they hadn't done this, that or the other in their life. But most people aren't extremes, are they? And if they are, maybe they thoroughly enjoyed their bit of life that they did have. George Best never made it to 100, but if somebody dug up George Best and reincarnated him and reactivated his brain to tell us whether he would have, having known that he would die at this point from this particular illness, would he choose to have lived his life differently, made different choices? I suspect the answer would be no. And isn't that essentially the definition of Naziistic? Whenever you have any kind of discussion about what is or isn't Naziistic, it's whether there's much choice involved in the scenario. And the Nazis were obsessed with health. People weren't given much choice but to try and be as healthy as they could be. And it seems strange that in a modern liberal society there's lots of people going around being obsessed that you shouldn't have a choice in how healthy you want to be.